Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for, I've lost track of how many of different state of the industry panels we've done, but today is science, which I'm really excited about. For folks who may not have met me, I'm John Frazier from Career Services, and we have some alums with us today who are going to talk about a little bit about what they do. And we're going to explore also a little bit about how the COVID-19 environment has both impacted their work and kind of what they see moving forward. Of course, science being particularly impacted and working hard to try and resolve the virus. So with us at the moment, we have Ellie Hartig and Chris Palmer. And I'd like to ask you to start just by introducing yourselves and maybe just tell us a little bit about your background, both at IC and past, and a little bit about what you do.
After you, Ellie.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ellie Hartig. When I was at IC, I was actually a double major in biochemistry and visual art. When I graduated, I had every intention of going to graduate school, but I was not quite ready. So instead of applying the senior year, I decided to take some time off and work in a research lab because I knew I wanted to do academic research, but I wasn't quite sure if I was going to go the biochemistry route or the straight biology route. So I just wanted to get some lab experience under my belt. When I moved to Maine to the MDI Biological Laboratory, where I worked as research staff for 6 years, really loved it. Was able to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do in my research career. I was publishing and teaching, but I kind of hit the cap of where I could go without a PhD. So I actually took a turn last year and started a PhD program through Tufts University. So now I am working on my thesis at the Jackson Laboratory, which is also in Bar Harbor, Maine, just down the road from MDI Biolab, working on my PhD in genetics.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Big life change too, of course.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it felt like backpedaling a little, and I'm happy to talk about like the interim period between undergrad and graduate school, and if there's anybody thinking about taking a gap area or.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely explore that. Appreciate that. Chris, how about you?
Sure. So I guess we'll start at Ithaca. So while I was at Ithaca, I was actually exploratory for the first 2 years that I was there. I guess that's probably still what they call undecided majors, though.
Yes, it is.
While doing that, was still interested in. I was thinking pre-med at the time, not ultimately where I ended up going. But after 2 years, I decided that, okay, I'm going to do biology, still thinking potentially pre-med, and then actually double majored in anthropology because I had done some of the gen ed requirements and enjoyed it. So ended up doing double in biology and anthropology. And then I think it was that summer as well, after sophomore year, that I actually ended up kind of with my first experience in neuroscience and actually ended up working with Gene Hardwick at Ithaca after. But I was fortunate enough to do an internship and highly recommend if you get the chance to do as many as you can, especially if you're interested in science, in a research lab. I did mine with Cephalon, which is a pharmaceutical company, and was kind of randomly assigned to their central nervous system wing, where I ended up doing electrophysiology. Actually did wholesale patch clamping, looking at developing an assay to test novel pharmacological treatments of neuropathic pain. With a guy named Peter West, who was my supervisor there, who actually ended up leaving pharma and going back to academia at the U of U. So if anybody's looking for like a graduate mentor, look up Peter. But anyway, after that, I Ithaca worked with Jean Hardwick in her lab, doing again more kind of EPHIS research on the guinea pig intrinsic cardiac plexus after various myocardial things that occur. I'm not sure what she's working on these days. We were doing MI stuff and like some chronic pulmonary disease stuff too. But after that, decided to pursue my PhD in neuroscience because I enjoyed it. So I ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania down in Philly, where my now wife lives. Was there for about 4.75 years, again, doing kind of predominantly electrophysiology and animal behavior, doing things like voltage-sensitive dye imaging, wholesale patch clamp, local fields, really looking at neurophysiological remodeling in the amygdala following mild traumatic brain injury,
Wow.
somewhat relating to, what we've seen in pop culture and the, not so much anymore. I guess it's still there. Some correlates kind of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, but more looking at the short-term impacts of TBI and how that may lead eventually to the hallmarks of CTE and those problems. But while I was at UPenn, I had still pretty much no idea what I wanted to do long-term with neuroscience. So thought of the academic route and explored, some postdoc options, thought of leaving altogether and kind of going to consulting or beyond. And ultimately, I was at one of my kind of penultimate thesis committee meetings and finished the meeting and was leaving the room. And one of my advisors kind of grabbed me in the hallway. And he's really an energetic Spaniard and just kind of, his name's Diego. And he yelled, he's like, "Hey, Chris, look at this friend. Does this thing with the brain in the operating room. You love it. You should call it." And I was like, "Okay, Diego, I'll call your friend. That sounds great." And from there, ended up working for an intraoperative neural monitoring company. So I kind of left academia and actually went into a weird form of clinical practice, doing exclusively deep brain stimulation neurophysiology and kind of procedural consulting for that deep brain stimulator implant procedure as well. Did that for a couple of years, and now I still work in the field. I just transitioned out of the kind of clinical aspect of it to one of the device companies that makes the DBS implants, actually Abbott, who I know has been in the news lately for making the COVID tests as well. And I now am working there as a therapy development manager, which kind of has responsibilities that span a few different business groups, if you will, mainly looking at things like business development, some sales management, some selling, and then there's a kind of clinical piece to it as well.
Sounds like networking was a really key part of your career path. It's interesting.
Absolutely. I've applied to plenty of jobs, and I've never gotten a job through applying to one. It's all been through networking.
I hear that more often than people think, actually. That's fascinating. So you mentioned COVID-19, so I'd like to ask you both, what has sort of in your own research and career path at the moment, what's been the impact of COVID that you've either been experiencing or your lab or company's been experiencing?
Ellie, if you're chatting, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted or not, but I'll go first, I guess.
Sure. Okay.
So first, I guess I'll go and just tell you kind of my experience with my kind of old research lab at UPenn. Just stay friendly with them now. I don't do any direct work with them anymore, but I'm pretty sure what happened in Philly is that they indeed, shut down the labs for quite a long time and are still kind of having some limited access to be able to go back in to our lab, which is in the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. They would let them go back in for exclusively animal husbandry and nothing else for, I think, about 2 to 3 months, which, depending upon, where you were at in your PhD, for some people was kind of a blessing because it allowed them time to really sit down and, work on their document, work on their thesis. And then, for others that were kind of in the throes of the probably, third year where you're really doing a lot of your heavy lifting in terms of data acquisition, it definitely a hamper there for those people. From a business standpoint, COVID-19, I think, has had economic impacts on positive and negative on just about every industry in the world. We in the medical device sector definitely saw a negative impact of it. However, working for a giant 120-year-old company like Abbott that has a diagnostics team that was able to make a lot of these tests and sell a lot of these tests, they were kind of good to their employees and kind of allowed us to ride it out until things came back online, which they actually have now. Even though the procedure that we're involved in requires an overnight stay in the ICU, which, as we all know, is now a very big deal with COVID. Hospitals have kind of they've made a decision that they, have to remain economically viable while continuing to provide healthcare. And a big way they do that is by, basically allowing elective procedures to happen. And deep brain stimulation, even though it is elective, even though it's very involved. So most of our facilities have kind of come back online to one level or another. And there's just kind of a very intense screening process now for everybody that's allowed in the hospital and allowed in the OR. And, everyone, including patients, pretty much gets regular COVID tests. Patients, I believe it's usually 72 hours before the procedure, and then the rest of us kind of at different intervals.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a significant change.
Juan, I was surprised when you said he was coming back from surgery, because I thought that elective surgery was something that was kind of like not right now. But I guess we are at the point where a lot of institutions have had to make these really difficult decisions where, in order to stay afloat, like the hospital needs to make money, and they make a lot of money through elective surgery. So these things have to come back. And I guess this shutdown period has afforded us enough time for our institutions to come up with these strategic plans to keep everybody as safe as possible. But it still is like surprising to me that there are people coming in for surgery. Yeah.
We thought it would be a lot longer road to recovery, from our kind of corporate standpoint, but it came back online pretty quickly. And now it's in flux, of course, in places of the country that are seeing higher case rates now. Things are clamping back down, and vice versa in areas that are not. But I would say it's going to be a very kind of dynamic process, elective surgeries in general, for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I
Ellie,
can talk a little bit about the Jackson Lab and how things have been affected there. So I guess I should introduce, so the Jackson Lab is an academic research institution, but also if you have ever done research with mice, you probably know JAX as the supplier of laboratory mice, because that the other, really the main prerogative of the institution is supplying all kinds of genetic strains of unique mice to be used for research. So that's an invaluable tool for all manners of biomedical research, including COVID research. So way back, maybe when we first caught wind of COVID being an issue, the lab started to thaw their SARS susceptible mouse line. So the regular run-of-the-mill laboratory mouse doesn't have the receptors necessary to be used for COVID research, because the virus can't be recognized, and the mouse doesn't have any sort of reaction, and the virus can't replicate. So there needed to be a specific type of mouse generated to perform this research. And luckily, with like the SARS outbreak years ago, they had already developed a mouse that could be used for the same purpose. So the kind of priorities of the Jackson Labs shifted very early on in our pandemic response to like just produce as many of these mice as possible. Also for these mice have been produced at cost, so it's not like Jax is making a lot of money from them. But because of the mouse breeding part of the institution, we have remained relatively insulated from like huge economic effects, because a lot of the responses from academic research institutions relied on us providing scientific services. So we actually were kind of like Abbott, like able to provide a necessary service for people who were freezing their mouse lines because they had to cut down on research significantly. So it's a unique situation where the institution has been able to like stay afloat and is actually looking to be on pretty good terms economically. The other thing I should speak on there is that most of the research is NIH grant funded, and grant funding has actually remained amazingly stable during this period. And a lot of the grants actually have explicit language, like permitting timelines to be shifted in the event of a global pandemic. Because, I mean, luckily, if there's anybody who understands the impact of this situation, it's scientists and public health officials. So that has been kind of a godsend for academic research, that the grant funding has been flexible enough that people were allowed to send their research staff home and have them work on data analysis and manuscript preparation and other things related to the research, but having to be in the lab. So we haven't had massive layoffs, or there has been a hiring freeze for certain parts of the lab, but there's still career searches or job searches for postdoctoral associates and graduate students, you know, for the incoming year are still coming. So yeah, I guess academia, out of all of the industries in the world right now, academia has been relatively insulated. Beyond, I guess I should make an exception for undergraduate research institutions who make money on tuition, and how that has been dramatically affected. But NIH funding has actually gotten even a little boost.
That's really nice to hear. I'd like to welcome our third panelist, Christia Hamilton. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? I sincerely apologize for being late.
No worries. Things are not always in our control, particularly in these days. We're so happy you're here. So what we've been doing is talking a little bit about the current environment and you know, sort of how COVID has impacted the industry and each panelist's organization. But as a starting place, hi, and perhaps you'd just like to introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit about your path.
Sure. Sorry, I'm just having an issue with just like the sound. So my name is Christia Hamilton. I graduated from Ithaca College 2007 with a degree in biochemistry. Right now, I work as Associate Director of Biomarker Discovery and Development at Hematogenics Laboratory Services. So we're a boutique contract research organization. So we do testing for diagnostic testing, as well as clinical trial testing, specifically in the oncology field.
Excellent. Well, we're so glad you're here. And so obviously this is not the world we all thought we were going to have on January 1st. What's sort of been the state of your organization in terms of how COVID has impacted it and what you do and what's happening?
So I think it's interesting you asked that. I mean, I guess, like I said, we specifically really work in the oncology field. So for us, the work doesn't stop.
Right.
So we do testing. So, you know, we do testing for like different sample types, different disease types in the oncology field. So what did happen is that, you know, we still had the same number of clients. We still had the same number of like samples that we're receiving. But what ended up happening is like a lot of clinical trials, like for certain diseases, and most of them that were not related to COVID, those kind of got pushed back. So, you know, individuals who might have wanted to start a clinical trial, unfortunately, would not have been able to do it because they're not able to go to the hospital,
Right.
you know, because individuals are not there to meet to discuss it, the protocols for it. But at the same time, I mean, millions of dollars are being poured into it, one. And two, I mean, it's this idea of that, you know, you can't hold up the world and you can't hold up treatment. So
Right.
the biomedical field is very it's a nice space to be in because you always need healthcare, and regardless of whatever is going on, you still have to work and, you know, continue with treatment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I mean, I know some people actually sort of personally in that boat, and it has, at least initially, really disrupted their care. And thankfully for them, it seems like it's being managed, but quite a challenge. So my question, I guess, we know that there's disruption to how we do things, and we know that a lot of money is being poured into research on the virus. When you think about young professionals who are entering the field, what do you think they most need to know at this point in time? You can take a second and think about that. I realize that's a big question.
I'm thinking, and this is basically people who are, these are people who are undergraduates trying to figure out what's the best field for them to go in. Is that really what you're asking, or?
Yeah, in essence it is, you know, or sort of how to navigate it, understanding that sort of the typical pathways into employment might look a little different than they did even, you know, let's say 6 to 7 months ago.
I would say basically, like I said, I mean, I work in the science field and I work in the biomedical science field. So I can only speak to that. And I would say that it's still going on. So like if you're thinking of going in, like, I guess the biological field, the biomedical field, I've always found to be, I guess, lucrative in the sense that healthcare will always be an issue. And if you're on the science side of it, you know, you're the one that are either developing the drugs, you're the one that's doing the testing, you're the one that's, you know, coming up with, you know, methods and ways and therapies that would help with development, you know, and will help with treating people. So, I mean, I would say that I'm in a nice space. And that was the question. I mean, I guess that was the initial question, which is, was there like a lapse for the work that I was done? No, for me, I continued working. However, you know, there were staff that were under me that were cut by half. So like people that were technicians and technologists, those ones, you know, they had reduced hours because there wasn't as much need for it, because not as many individuals were going to the hospital. So, I mean, what I would say is that more senior positions are more comfortable. Once you're in a more senior position, that means that, you know, you can work remotely. So this whole idea of working remotely, you know, can you basically find a position which will allow you to work remotely so that you're not in danger, as well as, you know, continuing the field as well. So we still had technologists that came in, but they had reduced hours, you know. So I think for me, I always like encourage people to kind of follow their dreams, and I always say, you know, go with what interests you, and, you know, even with the research space, go with what interests you. But I think, you know, if I was an undergrad, I'd tell you this: be practical about what you're doing.
Yeah. Ellie or Chris, what are your thoughts?
I guess I would just first like to give kudos, because this is a really, really difficult time to be just entering the workforce during massive hiring freezes and layoffs. And it's just, it wouldn't have been easy during normal times to go from undergraduate into your first career anyway. So this is an added layer of difficulty. So I just first want to say that I see you and I recognize how difficult it is. In terms of advice, I would say that this is a good time to start. If you haven't yet, if you're interested in something to do with research and you haven't yet overcome your fear of like using the command line or of R or Python or anything like coding based, this is a good time to try to like jump on that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of remote instruction for it, like the data carpentries and like O'Reilly books are great. Your institutions that you're affiliated with might actually offer like short courses surrounding that, and that would be a really great skill to build while you have some time and you're actually able to do that from home.
Yeah,
And
new
also
skill sets.
there are some, sorry.
No, go right ahead.
Oh, there are some courses and conferences that are available right now for free or greatly reduced rates because they've all had to go online. So if you're looking for some networking opportunities or just to like sample talks that are available in a field, I was just able to attend the Genetics Society conference for completely free because they waived the registration fee for everyone because they had to move it online. So there are actually some opportunities still available to just expand your scope a little bit, or maybe try to do some online networking. It's not the best, but the silver lining is now that it's free, it's more accessible. And I'm done.
Thank you. And I appreciate you saying that because I think sometimes professional associations aren't as well known to everyone as they're coming out of undergrad. We've seen this across a number of industries that professional associations are saying, our conference is free this year, we're going to bring it online. And so it is, it's a wonderful learning opportunity. Absolutely. Chris, anything you'd add or like to add?
Sure. I would second that idea of any kind of coding language you want to learn right now is a great plan. It gets pulled more and more into every industry, and if anything, we're seeing every piece of something that you can do virtually growing, right? Cybersecurity is growing, data center usage and building is growing, and then really anybody that can code anything. Super helpful right now. So absolutely that. In terms of like academia, I think we've already talked about it as being a somewhat protected industry from this. And yeah, I think there are a number of PhD programs and probably master's programs that are maybe not accepting applications or kind of still figuring out what they're going to do, which is frustrating, but ultimately, right, academia is not going to go anywhere. So like if academia is the route you want to go, I would say stick to it. And unfortunately, you know, you'll probably just have to be flexible as everyone kind of figures out their, you know, return to quote unquote normal plans. In terms of industry and trying to go directly from undergrad into your first job, I also echo it's kind of tough out there right now. There's a lot of people that have been laid off. There's a lot of opportunity. A lot of companies are kind of back to hiring again. I mean, we are, but to say that, the competition is a bit, because it's at the moment. So I have, a buddy that, is an MBA from West Point, suited for because he got laid off from his job in LA, and was ultimately rejected a couple times. And when he asked why, it was basically told like, look, you're perfect for this job, but the candidate we gave it to was a former, chief operations officer at company X. So it's like, it'll be a struggle. Stick with it. Something will work out. But yeah, again, definitely agree. See you at a time a little bit.
Yeah, so resiliency in particular at this moment. So for a lot of folks, the pathway into some of the things you're doing is through graduate school, and everyone here has done that or is doing it or come back to it. Talk to us, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit about how folks could be well prepared for that experience. What advice or insight would you have for someone who's thinking about pursuing a master's or a doctorate? Ellie, you came back to within the last year. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so just to reiterate briefly, for those that are just joining, I was in a research lab just with a bachelor's degree for a number of years before I returned to to graduate school to pursue my PhD. So I actually applied in maybe 2018 and started in 2019. So yeah, that is relatively recent for me. This is going to be a tough year for it because one of the the best ways to figure out where you're a good fit is actually getting to visit the campuses for interviews. So I'm not actually sure how that's going to be handled in the upcoming interview season. It will be early next year, so there's maybe some hope that things will be somewhat back to normal by then, but who knows? But in the meantime, I had mentioned previously that there are some conferences that are open for free. So that's a good thing to dip into, just to like figure out what kind of research is going on out there. It's a lot easier to attend a series of talks than to like sit down and read a bunch of academic papers, in my opinion. And you can also get more of a feel for what that person is really like also, and what they would be like as a mentor, because that graduate school is going to be shaped in a large part by the people that you're surrounded with and the person whose lab you join. And then maybe the other thing I'll mention right now is that there are some first year grants through the NSF called the Graduate Research Scientific Fellow or something, GRFP program, that you can only apply to as a senior or a first year graduate student, or in the interim between. So that this might be a good time now, if you have some time, to prepare to start thinking about putting together a grant proposal. And of course, then you have to design an experimental design, but the objective of this grant is more toward your potential as a researcher and less about the actual proposal, so that you have no obligation to actually stick to the research plan that you create. It's just like assessing your potential. So if you have some extra time and energy, I rushed mine together in my first year and I didn't get funded. And I think that maybe, I could have produced a better application if I hadn't also been juggling coursework and rotations. So this might be a good time to keep in mind that opportunity as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Other folks, advice about the grad school process or things that were helpful to you?
Sure, I'll go. I think two pieces of it, right? Preparation, you have to actually pick where you want to go and get into it. So that's definitely a big piece and a lot to talk about there. And then also just kind of, what to do in terms of success and being happy while you're there. In terms of preparation and application, the things that at least I think kind of helped me most in both making a decision and being accepted to places I wanted to go was number one, research experience. I mean, it's absolutely huge at the point in time that I applied. I assume it's the same now. And the other thing that I was just told point blank by several interviewers to why they were talking to me was because of my letters of recommendation and just kind of because of the mentors I had already had, and the relationship I had with them, and the kind of the time vested in developing that relationship. So Gene at Ithaca was one of them, and Peter at Cephalon another. But if you're interested in pursuing academia, your mentor is so important. And I mean, before and after grad school, they really do. They shape your whole experience. And I mean, at least every mentor I've had has been flexible enough to kind of let me pursue my research interests as long as it's, within the realm of their lab. And that's just been really important and helpful in kind of developing an interest and kind of allowing me to grow as a scientist and now professional. So definitely, look for those relationships, look for people that are going to be excellent mentors before, during, and after grad school. I think that helps with kind of all of it. And then while you're there, if you are lucky enough to get in, you want to go, I don't know. I think I would just say keep an open mind. Kind of if there are interesting projects that come up, obviously kind of temper feasibility with how exciting it is, but you never kind of really know what's going to work. You never know what direction your research is really going to go in. And you show up to your PhD program and you do your 3 or 4 rotations, and it's, you know, the one lab that you thought you would like the least, but you really, really love it, then go for it. That's it.
Nice, nice, thanks. Christy, anything you'd like to add to that from your experience? I don't know what everybody's internet connection is, so I know in our Zoom world, right? Well, let's open it up. Are there any questions for our panelists? Anything you'd like to know more about for the students and alums who are here on the call? Yeah, Felicia.
Hi, I'm Felissa. I'm actually an incoming freshman. And
welcome.
Thank you. Right now, I am an intended theater studies major, but I kind of want to double major, or at least minor or something, in a science-related field, but I'm having some trouble figuring out exactly where to go. I have a lot of interests, especially around things like psychology and neuroscience, and as well as sociology and environmental science. I also really like biology and chemistry in general, but I haven't had a whole lot of experience with biology since freshman year, so of high school. So yeah, so just any advice on trying to figure out where to go, because I have different interests.
Great question, and so glad that you joined us today.
I think that's really great that you're already here on this call. I think you're way ahead. And so even though I was a science major, I did not do any research in undergrad until my senior year. But actually, the faculty at IC are, like, the majority of them are really great and would welcome any interest in doing research in their labs. It might look a little different for the incoming year. We don't really know, but I would not be shy about approaching faculty that you think are doing interesting things, to just see if they would let you do a credit of academic research with them. I think that most of them would be happy to accommodate that, whether it would be in environmental science or organic chemistry. There are incredible faculty that have really cool projects going on.
And yeah, I totally agree with that. In terms of picking a major, if you're ready to do that already and you don't want to enter as a double, if you can stomach it and you're up for it, I would go for one of the kind of hard sciences, if you will, bio, biochem, chem. Just because it provides you all the prerequisites that you need to do kind of more things. If you ultimately decide you want to do a PhD in neuroscience or a PhD in anthropology or sociology, biochem gets you to both of them. But it's not necessarily true if you major in sociology, you don't necessarily have the prereqs for that neuroscience PhD or pre-med or whatever.
Thanks. Are there other questions? All right, not hearing any, and knowing that everybody has limited time, I guess what I'd like to do is ask our panelists just for any parting words of wisdom or advice for us.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Christia.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sorry, I realized that I think you had asked me a question. I just had to dial back in. I apologize.
No worries. Glad you're here.
Yeah, so I think based on like the other panelists and just the questions that were asked, I think the biggest advice I'd give to individuals who are either starting college or in college are utilize the resources at Ithaca. If it wasn't for Ithaca College, I wouldn't have gotten into a really good grad program. you know, it is a liberal arts college, but their science department is one of the best on the East Coast. So I would say, you know, go to your advisors, you know, talk to your advisors about what you want to do in life. And even if you don't know what you want to do, speak with them and speak with the department heads as soon as you get to college or even whilst you're there. So you can have like in-depth conversations to understand like what courses you should take and when you should take them. And then also utilize the resources for research. So I know the question was basically, you know, how to get into grad school. A big thing with grad school is that they want to see that you have some research experience. So utilize the faculty that you have there, you know, get involved in projects, get involved with speaking with individuals for it. But, and those recommendations, like I said, Ithaca College has some of the best professors I've ever met. So utilize the resources that Ithaca has to offer.
Thank you. Ellie, how about you? Parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, I hope I'm not being too optimistic when I say that science is actually not a bad field to be in right now. Whether it's the medical side or the research side, as Christia said, like that is always necessary. Like people will always need medical care. People will always need science. So, you know, that's been like my crystal of hope through all of this, is that this work is still really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. That said, I think hope is sometimes undervalued, but really important. Chris.
Oh, sure. I will share some advice that my grandfather gave me when I was entering my freshman year at Ithaca. He told me just to, I mean, literally what he said was, open as many doors as you can. That way, when it comes time to make a choice, you have options, and you can choose the thing that you're most passionate about. And what I took that to mean was kind of take every opportunity to learn something new or try something out that's presented, and give it a try, right? Learn that new thing, see if it's something you like. If it is, follow it. If it's not, great, you learned a new skill, you learned a new whatever, learned about something interesting. So yeah, just again, kind of be open to the opportunities that are presented to you and take advantage of everything you can when it comes to your learning and education. It will pay dividends in your career and your life.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank Ellie and Christia and Chris for being our panelists today and for sharing your own stories and, you know, what's going on, as well as giving great advice to folks who are, you know, coming along after you. It really, really matters, and I appreciate it, and we appreciate it. As I want to let folks know that if you need help, both now as well as when we cycle back into the academic semester, Career Services remains open. We're virtual at the moment, but pretty much everything we do when we're in our offices, we're doing now. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have questions, if you need help, we're here for you. And thanks to everyone for being here today. Really enjoyed it. And have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Please feel free to reach out anytime.
Thanks, appreciate that.